Hi, and welcome to Virtual Coffee Season 3 special episodes. Today, we kick off a new season dedicated to climate change and food of the future. Today's episode is based on Our Changing Menu, a book about climate change, the food we love and need. We have today two of the authors, Professor Mike Hoffmann from Cornell University and Dr. Danielle Eiseman, also from Cornell University. I hope you enjoyed this and you increase your science literacy through the wonderful stories they're going to share with us in the way they wrote this wonderful book. By the way, this amazing book about climate change and food is available on Amazon with a special discount for a limited time. Enjoy.
So I'll start with my personal story on why the book. And all of us who are aware of climate change want to be able to help other people understand what's happening. And over the years, I've given many talks on climate change, but it seemed like every time I brought up its impact on food, especially things like coffee and chocolate that really got people's attention, they really listened and asked a lot of questions. And it makes sense. We all eat. And we all care about our foods, our favorite foods, our family traditions, it's all part of our cultures. So, and also to be effective at talking about climate change, it has to be relevant. As I frequently say, melting glaciers are bad enough, but the loss of coffee is downright terrifying. So that was kind of the aha moment of the whole idea, to get people's attention about climate change and act if they care about their food, and most of us do. So here I'll turn it over to Danielle to complete. She can share her story and tell you the rest of the story about the amazing artist and others.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Laboratory, for having us on. For me, getting involved with the book, it was a gradual process. So when I first started working at Cornell with Mike, I offered to help out mainly by collecting research and summarizing some of that. And so when I started to do that, both Mike and Carrie Koplinka-Loehr, who is the other co-author on the book, they invited me to help in starting to write some of the chapters and some of the information that was included in the book. So it's the reason why I wanted to become involved in the process was, not only because I enjoy working with Mike, we always have a lot of laughs together, but also because I've worked in the field of climate change and public engagement for such a long time. And prior to that, I was a professional chef. So the idea of communicating with people about climate change through food was really appealing to me. And it's a way to kind of bring together all of my backgrounds, or all of my past lives, so to speak, to tell the story of climate change. So I have I not only have a cooking experience and culinary background, but also a background in chemistry and carbon management, as well as consumer behavior. So this book was a way to create one body of work where I could take all of that education and experience and knowledge that I have and share it in a way that was very cohesive. Up until this point, I think most of my work has been rather disjointed or disconnected. So this was one way to bring it all together. And then, we we worked as a team. So this was initially Mike's big idea. So we always call it Mike's baby. And he brought together Carrie and I. So Carrie Koplinka-Loehr is a freelance writer in New York, and she worked with Mike for a long time. And Mike, you might have to correct some of the details if I don't have them correct, but she used to work at the Northeastern IPM, or it was an Integrated Pest Management Center, with Mike when he was the director there. And so they had a really great working relationship. And Mike brought Carrie on board to help write and interview people to include profiles within the book, so that we create this human side, or include this human side in the story that we tell in the book. And then we brought on an artist, Lindsay Potoff, and we decided, and again, this wasn't initially our idea, but when we first started talking about what would be in the book, we thought about infographics and ways that we could tell the story with images. And as the conversations continued, we thought maybe something that was a little bit more, I don't know, like maybe a throwback, perhaps. I don't know how I would describe it, but we thought about some of the drawings and how we could display some of these stories, and we thought we could hire an artist. So we put out a call for a student artist at Cornell, and Lindsay, I think, was one of the first people that I interviewed. And we sat down and we talked for a little while, and then she said, "Why don't I just draw you something and I'll bring it back in a couple of days?" So she went off and drew a stalk of wheat, and she brought it to me, and I was blown away by what she had drawn. And then I ran down the hall to Mike's office and showed him, and we decided that Lindsay was the perfect person to help with the artwork in the book. I guess I'll jump in first. So we're so disconnected from where our food is. There's a long history of, way before the food system or the food supply chain got so big, and before there was this concept of value adding along the supply chain. People knew who grew their food. They knew where their food came from. They had these very close relationships with the people that provided food for them. And that relationship has become very disconnected and lengthened throughout time. And so people don't have a close relationship with the people that produce food. They don't have a full understanding of how food is processed, how it's transported, and all of those inputs that are added throughout the food supply chain. And we wanted to really highlight that, to show how many people are actually working in these different industries. And we wanted to share with people the stories behind the people who are providing food for us, which is a huge job. And it's a global job, and it's a difficult job. And we wanted that to shine through.
And I think the other part of this is people should also understand the risk that is posed to the food that's coming from so many parts of the world. The recent example of that, one of the largest ships in the world getting stuck in the Suez Canal, was a perfect example of what could happen in the future with climate change. Either there's a drought and there's not enough water, like actually right now in the Mississippi, there's a drought, and the barges are having a difficult transporting enormous amounts of goods that flow on the Mississippi. So we wanted to, one, as Danielle said, also help people appreciate who is producing this food for us, like the family in Western Africa harvesting cacao and making all of $4 a day, and yet we enjoy that chocolate. So we need to appreciate the individuals out there, and farming is challenging. Even in the US, it's very challenging, getting worse with our changing climate. So there's a strong connection to food, and also just to raise awareness Yes, you can go to the grocery store and get all these things, but it's a huge and complicated system that's getting it there. And the risks of that are increasing, again, because of climate change. Some call it an existential threat to basically our way of life. Yes, current status is simply not good. We've got 50% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we used to have, which has all kinds of implications. The signs of climate change are everywhere. The fires out west because of higher temperatures and the drought are just making conditions perfect for the fires. Even right here in upstate New York, a few weeks ago, we were in a red zone. The air quality was bad, almost as bad as right there in Washington and Portland. That was mind-boggling. Melting glaciers that Greenland is now melting at a rate that's never been heard of or recorded before. So the symptoms are all over the place. And those of us who spend a lot of time in this space can get frightened, to say the least. So I think, it's a time for action. It's a time for the topic we're sharing here today, our food, to get people more aware and to act on this issue. So we'll see what the future holds, but at the current trajectory, things are going to get worse for a period of time, but we can hopefully modify that a little bit and adapt to the situation. But it's going to take all of us to get into this fight against climate change.
Yeah, I don't have that much more to add, although I think it's important to highlight that some of the stories that come out, or some of the messages that come out, especially when it says we only have 9 years left, or I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what that timeline means. So a lot of people interpret that as the world's going to end in 9 years, whereas it's really about stopping or reducing the rapid changes that we are seeing, so that things don't get much worse than they are projected to get. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that, so they automatically disregard those messages, especially when it comes to making changes in their lifestyles and asking for policies that reduce the impacts of climate change or reducing emissions. So there's still a lot of education that needs to happen.
And I'll add to that there are solutions. And when people do see those headlines, they basically, partly fear, whatever, they just shut down. What can I do? I'm just one person. So again, our story is to help people, I call it sometimes, find your greater purpose. And now is the time to find your greater purpose in helping solve this problem, mitigate the impacts of climate change, helping us adapt, rather than just to be honest, sitting in front of your television and spending your time doing that. We can all be participating in this effort. And this can be eye-opening for a lot of people. It's another message we're sharing. So a plant, I think everybody realizes, requires air, in particular carbon dioxide and oxygen, the right temperature, water and soil. We've all had potted plants that haven't done very well and forget to water them, or we put them next to a radiator and they get cooked. So let's just take a crop plant in the field. Well, there's already mentioned much more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and some will argue, well, that's great because it has a fertilization on the plant. It's got more food, so to speak, and it grows faster and bigger. Well, in reality, the stresses from higher temperatures, more extreme weather, are going to offset any gain that crop plants in the way they benefit from increased CO2. But there's been a lot of research where scientists grow plants under conditions, higher levels of CO2 that we might see in the future. One of the outcomes, herbicides are less likely to control some plants. they've sort of, in this process, become more resistant to herbicides. One of the more profound impacts is, say, by mid-century, the nutritional quality of our major crops, rice, and corn, and others, will decline. There'll be a 30% reduction in vitamins, some vitamins in rice, because again of increasing CO2. The same goes for minerals and protein. So those of us in the wealthy countries will probably do okay, but those already on marginal diets are really going to be compromised if this continues. Now, plant breeders can come along and help develop plants that will retain those nutritional qualities, but there's a lot of stories about how CO2 in the future will affect plants. The other one's clearly water. We're already seeing that, the mega drought out west, which was simply a drought, but now made much worse because of climate change, has huge impacts on food, especially in California. We in the Northeast now get rainfalls that are essentially downpours. We're up over 50% in heavy precipitation events, which is downpours, and that makes it challenging for farmers. It washes away soil, nutrients, and sometimes makes it really difficult for them to get in the field. Melting glaciers. I enjoy blueberries in the wintertime, and they come from Peru or Chile. And they're dependent on melting glaciers in the wintertime, or actually ice caps. They're going to be gone in 20 years. There go the blueberries. Temperature, water, I think I've covered those already. You know, there are additional stresses, they're changing, so it's affecting plants on land. Soil, higher temperatures again affects the quality of soil. There's more carbon release when higher temperatures, the storms wash it away. That's on land, and if we also look into the oceans, phytoplankton, which are essentially the basis of life in the ocean, are being put at risk because with warming temperatures, the oceans are becoming more stratified. They're layered. So the nutrients that typically come up from upwelling from deep in the ocean hit that layer and never make it up to the phytoplankton, which, by the way, again, are the basis of the food chain in the ocean, but also supply us half of our oxygen. In the Indian Ocean, they already recorded about a 20% decline in phytoplankton. So those plants that we depend on for life are all being changed by climate change.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Look forward to seeing you again in our next episode.